I'm so excited about this series. Um, so no, unfortunately, Nick Nack is not getting a break from these villainess manhwas, but we've got something of an icon in the genre. Um, so this is Beware the Villainess, volumes 1 and 2. And I was actually really excited for you to read these because Beware the Villainess is kind of infamous amongst fans of the Villainess manhwa as possibly one of the funniest, doesn't take itself seriously, um, kind of comedic representations of this particular type of story. And the artist is phenomenal at depicting this in a way that is just constantly memeable, like constant memeability. Um, and so it's kind of one of those like standouts that's very easy to recognize. And it does feel different than a lot of the rest of these because I think the conflict is less, oh no, how do I get away from what's happening to me to end up with a better ending, and more, whose skull do I need to crack to get what I want? In the nicest way possible. I love it. I think it's great. It's completed. It's not too long. So this is not a series that goes on for like 10, 15 books. No, it's completed and not that long. So how did you feel about this, Nick Nack?
Well, this is the one I'm probably the blurriest on because it's also now been a hot minute since I've read this, and I have not
You
reviewed this one.
literally said that you read this like a week ago when you brought me the books back.
I brought you, like, I read it a
Simpsons.
few days back. No, I remember enough about it. Like, I was gonna bring that up,
Yeah.
but it's been a couple weeks.
Well,
Um, but yeah. So going off my memory here, this one has like a tone that is very much so just someone sitting in a rocking chair going, "Murder is illegal. Murder is illegal. Murder is illegal. Gotta don't kill him."
yeah. Like this is our main character is every day having to remember that she cannot just murder the prince and her brother and everyone else in her life who annoys her. Not that she herself is any less ridiculous for this. Um
No.
and but they don't try to play it like she's less ridiculous for this. This is for full comedic effect, you know?
Well, her pseudo murderous tendencies are about as annoying to the characters around her as their tendencies are to her.
Yeah. And the misunderstandings are fantastic, you know?
It's like if in Baccarina, the characters were as annoyed by her antics as the audience gets.
Yeah, so to kind of touch on the, at least for me, metaphorical elephant in the room, is I mentioned the art. So the art's by Blue Kana, right? And I'll put some image examples up on screen as we're talking about this, but the artist likes to make tributes to other art and animation and media that they enjoy, I think is the best way to put it. Um, and they like to draw the characters in a variety of different styles fairly regularly. This is not like kind of a one-off, like it's not like you just see a chibi in like one scene every like 50 pages. No, the art style literally page to page switches up. In fact, there's probably more aped meme art than there is genuine, just 100% normal representations of the characters, to be honest, in these books. Um, there's JoJo references, there's like three different types of chibis. Occasionally the characters go from looking like a whole ass adult person to like a 5-year-old with like watery deer eyes. There's Shining references, there's other animation references. Occasionally Melissa is just drawn looking like Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemist. Um, Famously, that Knick Knack very much enjoyed. There's a Simpsons panel.
Yeah, it is just the Homer choking Bart scene.
Uh-huh, and it's Melissa and the Prince. Um, which is fantastic. So it really it makes it very dynamic and interesting to read when literally page to page there can be a completely different art representation of the character. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you
it's a
can go
very,
from
very visually interesting series to flip through.
yeah, and I think a lot of that adds to it. Obviously, it's all meant to add to the comedy of the
Hmm.
series. Like if nothing else, I would almost, I don't know if I would 100% because of how early in the genre this came out because it's a little bit older, but I'd almost slide this into like beating a dead horse version of the villainess story where it's like obviously just making fun of all of the villainess tropes. But I don't think it's quite there. I think it's just a very comedic representation
Well, I almost
of the
wonder
trope.
if it's kind of sitting in that same weird beating a dead horse situation that Konosuba sits in, where yes, at one point this was a parody of the genre, but the genre has also continued way
Yeah.
past it and evolved partially inspired by this to the point where now it is just a funny representation of the genre as a whole.
Yeah, because Beware the Villainess did spawn, like there's a lot of stories that were written after it that follow a little bit that are very obviously following the kind of Beware the Villainess track, right, rather than like a different villainess manga or manhwa. You know what I mean? So it's like
Hmm.
I feel like if the genre hadn't continued writing, this would have been a beating the dead horse, but the genre continued evolving. And so it's really just a good comedic version of the story. Um, and I can appreciate the fact that like Melissa is very obviously not interested in romance. And like, not that she's not interested in romance because that's what got her in trouble, but genuinely just that every single man is a moron. And she's like, I can't deal with this level of stupidity in my day-to-day life, right? Like they're just too stupid. Like they're not even thinking for themselves. And that's a problem. And I'm loving our actual heroine coming in book 2. Because she's such a fun character. She kind of reminds me of she reminds me a lot of the girls from Hame Fura and their relationship to the main character in that they're like she's got like very much wants there to be some sort of like lesbian thing going on.
Yeah.
Um
I don't feel like we've gotten enough of her yet, at least as far as the stuff we've read where I've picked up
yeah,
on that yet. So I just as a heads up, like she only really gets her proper like full introduction to the story like in the second volume that we read towards the end.
true. Yeah.
So
But what a
yeah.
fantastic introduction. Illustrated and represented to us by some of my favorite panels. Buff Melissa covered in blood. It might be one of my favorite representations of like buff Melissa. um and I just think that like I'm loving where this volume ends, right? Because this volume ends with literally kind of a oh god from the heroine and the introduction of in theory another one of the main male cast. Um which is I think a great place to end.
With my thoughts here, I don't want to take away from the series because this is a really well written series and the art style alone is worth reading it for.
Mhm.
But I will say it does have a very targeted demographic here because I don't know if you've picked up on it from Seki saying it out. There are no competent men at all in this series. Everyone's an idiot except for the one guy she literally picks up off the street and is completely loyal and in servitude of her. So like I'm not going to go down the full like everything's woke train, but this is not a series that's it's not a particularly balanced perspective. It very much is playing up to the oh, I've been there a woman's perspective when it comes to men.
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely true of what's been represented so far. I don't think that's going to be the case for the whole series once we read more of it, but certainly for the first two volumes, because 90% of the interaction with men that we get is interaction with male main characters. But like for example, in the first volume, there's the scene with like the gardeners, right? Where they're like trying to get out of the way and avoid being pancaked in the middle of a fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like obviously they're not acting like idiots. They're doing
Yeah.
the smart thing and getting out of the fucking way, you know? So it's not every man per se. It's just the men that we've seen are all morons.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I don't want to take away from the series because it is well
Yeah.
written. It is it could easily improve past these two volumes as far as that aspect goes, but it does have a little bit of a Homer Simpson Peter Griffin syndrome going on with the men in the story where they are starting to lean very you don't find very many competent men here.
Fair.
But also that's not necessarily something I hold to this series against this series. I'm just saying as it stands now, it's got a very particular demographic it's looking at.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways this reminds me a little bit of Hamefora, but it's more tolerable because the main character isn't quite as stupid. I will say
Yeah.
season two really soured me on Hamefora. Like watching the anime of season two and then reading the manga like of that section really put a dent in my enjoyment of Hamefora, and it was simply because the main character is it's not even that she's dumb, she's just written to be dumb. Whereas at least Melissa here is like learning and evolving as she goes, which makes her automatically more tolerable for me. Which is, I think, a fair thing to say in this case. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm honestly this is one of those series where I was like I was really surprised to see it getting an adaptation because it has been completed for a few years now. Um, and so I would have thought that it would have gotten an adaptation earlier or kind of been left to not get a physical copy because it's been completed for a few years. But honestly, with as popular as manhwa's gotten, for a while I was a little bit worried that it wasn't picking up enough steam to start getting older stuff adapted to physical copies and it was just going to be newer stuff. But this is actually one of two or three series of completed works that are older that I've seen start getting paper copies, like paper adaptations. So I have some pretty high hopes for the manhwa publishing in general because it seems like they are starting to have confidence enough in the audience that they're feeling that it's possible for them to go back into sort of the archives of series that are finished, and that they don't have the lure of like new volumes coming out on or new chapters coming out on Webtoon to get people interested to buy the paper volumes too.
Well, there's an
Because
evident boom right now, and I'm pretty
yeah.
sure, like,
But like for example, Beware the Villainess is not available on Webtoons. I don't think it's available on Toon either. It was published on a different site entirely. So it's like I'm seeing some promising signs that they're starting to go back into sort of the catalog of finished stories that already had their heyday and publish them now in paper.
so as much as like this is a completely different genre, I think a huge part of that is that they're right now, and this is not because of the anime, but
Hmm.
just solo leveling alone, I think is giving a lot more confidence in Korean manhwa in general, whether that be webtoon or otherwise, just across the board on publishing. So you're seeing sort of the boom that comes with and that comes with that kind of confidence. You see it in anime too with light novels and manga getting a higher boom when like one really takes off. Like there was a huge localization boom when Jujutsu Kaisen took off.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that you're seeing like the backlog starting to be pulled from more because that's the stuff people can be confident in the fan base and the quality of.
Yeah, but I am glad of it because that has meant that Beware the Villainess has come out, and then another series that we'll be reviewing relatively soon that is not a villainess story at all. It's modern rom-com. It has gotten a paper adaptation, and it's one of my favorite series of all time, so I'm very excited to have you read it. So yeah. I think that's about all I have to say about Beware the Villainess right now. Technically, we don't even have our entire main cast as of the end of the volume two.
We only just
Um,
introduced the original, like the original game's heroine.
Yeah, and we literally saw one frame of one of the other male love interests. So there'd definitely be more. I think I kind of want to talk about all the characters in the next set of books when we have them all. Yeah. Well, that's really it for me. Um, Solid books. I absolutely recommend it. Recommend you go pick up some paper copies. Mostly because these aren't easily available on online sites. So if you want a copy, paper's probably your best bet right now. It's a little bit cheaper, to be honest, than buying it on some of those sites that it might be available on digitally. But you know, you can also find it pirated, I'm sure, because it's older. So yeah. I will be back next time with a different set of books.
Yeah.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Bye.